Hello, dear colleagues. I'm proud to present my research result and result of uh, our working group on SEA conference. And now I'll go to the presentation. So, the topic of our research is mediatization of needs of people with disabilities in war discourse in Ukrainian social media. We work with Big Command on by request um, of public of NGO Public Alternative, and we consulted with specialists in this topic, and this material was prepared as well for the monitoring of social media discourse of people with disabilities in war. I highlighted several points on our research, and the first is for sure is that the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine became an event that pretended to change the game all over the world, and consumption of social media has increased due to the war, uh, especially compared to the use of more legally regulated and better researched traditional radio, television, and the press. And I would say that it was prepared, this consumption was prepared by COVID as well. Ukrainians in social media show awareness of topic related to vulnerable groups in society, such as people with disabilities. Further, you will see this abbreviation PWD. And most interesting thing was that mediatization in this research is seen not only as the consequences of technological threat, but also as the context in which society is located and where media consumers influence media by manifestation of their needs. I applied to wide theoretical background, and you see it on a screen, and you will see it in a paper. I will emphasize some things on this theoretical map because it is separate dimension of research on the topic of needs of people with disabilities. One point is that mediatization is a widely researched in political science and media studies and other topics, but not focused especially on people with disabilities needs. And if we have research how people with disabilities consume media, we will have some very specific issues, some very specific publication on nosologies of people with disabilities, or publication about consumption of current age of people with disabilities. So, yeah, and we use our methodologies that apply to critical discourse analysis and social media analysis and message analysis. And in this research, we tried to combine these three dimensions of mediatization of people of disability needs in social media. Aim of research object and hypothesis, here they are. The study aims to describe the model of the mediatization of needs of people with disabilities in social media in Ukraine during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, based on the data selected for the report Social Media Discourse on Needs of People with Disabilities. The object of the study is social media discourse on this topic, of this team. And the main question is, how do people with disabilities communicate their needs in situation of war? And this involves answering the following question. Who is talking? What do people discuss? How do people talking about needs using social media? We consider the following hypotheses. First one, people with disabilities manifest themselves as active participants in communication. Sometimes they are equal to other people that just come to use the social media. Second hypothesis, the discourse of needs during the war is largely militarized. The topic of needs of people with disabilities, both an opportunity for inclusion of people with disabilities and field of manipulation. And hypothesis three, third hypothesis, in the social media discourse, the needs of people with disabilities are mediatized on several levels, technologically and psychological. A sample of posts includes either open publication or comments on personal profiles that were published in the first half of 2023 with the geolocation Ukraine were used for this analysis. On the screen you see methodology, and I will point some thing on manual coding that we added to our sample. So we code manually what the nosology of people with disability is presented in messages, type of author, type of specific type of author, type of people with disability represented in messages, author's attitude to people with disabilities, and sentiments to see the dynamics of discourse. Quantitative data analysis is combined with discourse analysis in this research. On this slide, you see geography of distribution. And what is interesting that we look on whole Ukraine, including occupied territories, but we decided to take in account to add not delete messages that geolocated from other countries, because it demonstrate where people moved. So, and we have quite a big percent of, no, not the big, but percent from Russia, because we can say that people moved to Russia as well, and other countries all over the world where people discuss needs of people with disability from Ukraine. At first, we start. We start not just from actors, but from images that represented images of people with disabilities that represented by authors in this discourse. So, and there are three types of people with disabilities in the discourse of social media during the war. First, people people with disability became get their disability as a result of the war. Second is people who had disability before the war. And it is mostly, they have mostly the discussion in bubbles of specific communities by nosology. And third one, somebody who want to get the status of disability to avoid mobilization or going abroad, mostly discussed by men. And what images do we have? First, on the first play, a hero, and It is mostly in media that in social media and personal accounts on territory controlled by Ukraine. Second point, marginalized people. We see it in social media controlled by Ukraine, but sometimes and mostly this image we see on occupied territories occupied by Russia, and on that with this geolocation we saw such images like sufferer and victim. Like in the middle is a person with disabilities, ordinary person, just a person who has some barriers and some barriers in and some special needs, and we have images people with person with disability as a sick person, just to imagine that somebody could be could have a remedy for this disability, but actually it is the old version of understanding disability in society. So you see the distribution of attitude on these personalities, and you see that if people talk about people, a person with disability as marginalized person, as sufferer or victim, this mostly it has mostly bad attitude. And if we see here even ordinary person, it has more positive connotations. In a discourse, we saw what we saw a situation where people with a person with disability mentioned, and who is in this situation, who was these images. Mostly this image is mostly represented by adults because they are mostly active in social media. They talk from themselves, and they talk from the person with disability if they are guardians. If children mentioned, they don't talk from themselves. They somebody talk from their person from about their needs. We see military men and military women. Military men mostly discussed, the more discussed than military women, and military men represented as heroes, military women as like exclusion from ordinary stories, and women talk more about needs from themselves. When there are a lot of women who talk about needs of military men with disabilities. We see civilians, men and women. Um, uh, Sometimes no uh, so different we have differences here as well, because if we are talking about men civilians, it is about avoiding mobilization. About if they talk about women, it could be victim, and she could be used by somebody to get the certificate of guardian of this women. Elderly people, and interesting it is Paralympians, because they are presented and they are appears in a discourse as influencers and somebody who advocates needs of people with disabilities. Um, Dynamics of sentiments is represented on a screen. Most important thing that should be mentioned is that we can see that peaks of emotional peaks is connected to events. And in February, we had a rememberation of full-scale invasion, and there was a lot of messages about people with disabilities that recall their situation year before in 2022 when they evacuated or they experienced the first days of full-scale invasion. And then we see calendar events that connected to ordinary life of people with disabilities. So they in spring they go to the medical commission and there was a lot of negative emotions, and now we see the situation what with this medical commission, many scandals. Then and then special days like day of UN Day of Person with Down Syndrome, World Autism Day, and etc. Some and we saw uh, other event, other celebrations uh, like Easter, and before, and in January there was New Year or Christmas. So celebrations that all people in Ukraine celebrate together. So, and other thing, it is just without events. It is just like uh, median of the discourse. Yeah. Um, and you see topic of discussion, we divided it from two, two category. One category, people talk about situation of situations that contexted disabilities or where disabilities context connected to giving humanitarian aids, and there was an event that increase uh, proposition for people with disabilities with other people who were starved with this tragedy of Kakhovka dump. So we see this inclusion of people with disabilities and other people who need the who need help in equal way. So there's no line of division. They are together and they see each other in one bad situation. A lot of messages about inclusion, and it is the result of big work of civil society activists before the war, because inclusion is not a neologism. Inclusion is a term, a term that known by people, but mostly this topic appear in connection with educational programs or educators or specialists who are work with works with kids and provide educational services. So you see other topics, it is quite, they are quite reasonable, but and we generalized it by meanings of the messages, and we saw that in several topics people use just information to just tell it as a information, but in other topics we see that it developed as storytelling about people with disabilities. Next table show us nosology of people with disabilities, and it is not it differentiates not only by nosology, but in different nosology we have different type of messages and different approach to prepare messages. So we see, for example, if we are talking about people with disability, with hearing disabilities, they produced a lot of video, because video is mostly useful for them, and they uh, promote their sign language or special video about with songs with this sign language. So yeah, and if we are talking about somebody who has amputation, it is mostly engaged in stories about militaries spreading with proud. So this like storytelling goes. Next, what is interesting is authors. Men speak primarily for themselves. Women speak not only for themselves, but on behalf of their children, relatives, or friends. It is how it is work in society, works in society, working in society, because it is something that we have due to stereotypes. So women feel responsibility moreover than men for people with disabilities, and an issue that adults more active than other person. Communication. We divided authors due to their specificity, and we saw that this division show us a different behavior toward audiences. So we saw specialists who has trust from people with disabilities, and we saw that they built their communities and social media before the full-scale invasion, and it helped people to provide and to have an access to very important information in such bad situation. And specialists are more successful in gaining in engaging audiences and building a sustainable communication. And they provide their information in a consumer way, so even sometimes advertise themselves using this situation. Media representatives, it is very interesting if we compare them to the activists, because activists tell more information, and they work as journalists, but media work as storytellers mostly, and they pay, media representatives pay more attention to the facts that can be used to produce story. Activists tell more information, operative information. They sometimes they go faster than journalists. Persons with disability were very effective in communication, and it especially because their messages are very focused, and they know what they want. So it is their communication very specific, and they target their audiences quite successfully and quite smart. What was we had an insight about one person with disability. He's gamer, and when When full-scale invasion started, he changed their channel, their content a lot, because before the war he to tell about games, and he had a very huge audience among gamers. He spoke Russian, and that is why he had Russian audiences. And when full-scale invasion started, he switched the topics from game to Ukrainian history, and he mocked their he mocked his fans, and if they are not telling well about Ukraine. Other group, guardians of persons with disabilities, and from them we had two voices, just a voice, they give voice to their people with, they tell about needs of people with disabilities, and another voice about needs of their guardians, about their they are tired. They told that they are tired, but they are helping people. So guardians, it is very interesting actor in this discourse that represent not only people with disability, but themselves. And officials mostly use communication to promote themselves and to make to to yeah, to promote themselves. And next, so what we get having this data, this data set, we have this model of communication where in this discourse, this hybrid model, we saw that some people connected through media chain as it did specialists. No, not specialists, and it is surprising, but media chain used by officials, because they try to use their media channels to promote same information, but they has no trust, so they just push this media channel to spread information as a product, information about people with disability. And usage of fan model we saw in communication of specialists, because they have trust and they connected with their audiences as personally as medium. So we see this propagandistic way of communication. And networking between people in groups by nosology, and a group of activists was the most popular strategy in this discourse. And the effect we saw in discourse of people with disability in social media during the war, that this effect I call double mediatization, because communication mediatized by technology due to this three strategy that connected to each other. And so, as I said, so people spread information granted by technology. And second level, information spread not only because of efficiency of messengers or efficiency of social media, but technology of social media, but information spread because of the meaning of the message. Sometimes messages about people about needs of people with disabilities with disabilities used by authors and actors of communication as such that give them status in community, that help them to represent themselves as somebody who empathetic, um, who has an empathy to people with disabilities and to made their reputation because of this message. So this message about needs of people with disabilities live their own life, and this message provide communication and impact and influence the connection between people who are involved in this discussion. In this research, we come to such conclusions. And the discourse of the need of people with disabilities, we have this effects of double mediatization. The efficiency of dissemination in meanings, empathy, compassion, help is emotionally driven, and it due to it we need to pay attention of for media literacy and understanding and in of messages about needs of people with disabilities. Our data analysis shows that in a crisis, person depends on the sources of information, and it is something that should be said that on occupation territories, people has lack of information. They had no access to sources with trusted with approved information about help, and they are in a risk of manipulation from officials of so-called republic, which is on occupied territories. So with vulnerability of people with disability on occupied territory higher than on territories controlled by Ukraine. The discourse on the need of persons with disabilities is militarized, and it is quite no, it is reasonable from one side. From other side, it is we need to talk to mention it and to point on it, because if if society interested in people with disability only because they are military person, we have a risk that public opinion on people with disability after the end of armed conflict, after the end of the war, this interest to people with disability can be can disappear, and society will not be helpful for people who were not military men. So, considering the effects of mediatization, communication of needs of people with disabilities requires the development of specific policies and agreements regarding the necessity of personal data protection, especially in the cases where storytelling is about facts of people that and situation about people with disabilities. So the necessity of personal data protection, and in this discourse we have threats of hate speech, disinformation, and ordinary populism. That is what I wanted to say about this research. Thank you for your attention, and feel free to contact our group on all questions according to this research.